Welcome. Today on the Grand Tribe podcast, we're joined by Maddy Dychtwald, national best-selling author of Ageless Aging, co-founder of AgeWave, and one of the world's leading voices on longevity and healthy aging. But today's conversation goes beyond research. Maddy also shares her personal journey as a brand new grandmother, revealing why our relationships with grandchildren may be one of the greatest secrets to living longer, healthier, and happier lives. We'll jump into this conversation with Maddy after a word from today's sponsor, Road Scholar. The moments your grandchildren remember most are the ones you share together. With Road Scholar's Grandparent Adventures, you'll explore incredible destinations, learn from expert instructors, and discover the world side by side. From national parks to wildlife encounters and hands-on cultural experiences, these programs are designed to bring generations closer through the joy of learning and travel. Learn more at roadscholar.org/grandadventures. Maddy, welcome to the Grand Tribe podcast. I'm excited to have you on and talk about aging, as well as even talk a little bit about your experience with being a new grandma.
Thank you, Greg. It is such a pleasure to be here. And I talk about aging and longevity all the time, but I never get the chance to talk about being a new grandparent. So I'm super excited.
Yeah, well, one of the biggest things that I think sometimes we get lost in when we're having niches and having areas of research is that sometimes we forget that, hey, we're moms and dads and we're grandparents, and we also like talking about that aspect of our lives as well.
Absolutely. It's all about the way you feel and how that feeling translates into action and actually into a kind of new knowledge.
One of the things that I do want to get us started on, though, is talking a little bit about aging and some of your research and insights into that. And what I'd love for you to do is talk to us about when you first started working and researching aging, some of the things that you found there that maybe people, may have had a misunderstanding about, but are starting to get corrected or updated or better information now.
Yeah, good question to start with. So, Greg, as you may or may not know, I've been digging deep into the research on aging, longevity, the new retirement for more than 40 years. So that might be longer than some of the listeners have even been alive. And at the time, my husband and I started our company, AgeWave, at our kitchen table. And at that time, 50 was considered over the hill. And when I say over the hill, people viewed aging as a problem to be solved rather than a stage of life to be embraced. People assume that getting older, it meant inevitable decline. Now, sure, there can be decline as we get older, especially from a physical standpoint, but it's not inevitable. What's exciting to me, especially I'm 76, so to learn that there are many aspects of aging that are far more malleable than we ever thought possible. I mean, the science backs this up. We used to think that genetics was responsible for 75% of all of our health and well-being. We now have learned from the most recent science out of places like Calico Labs that it's more malleable, that up to 85% of our health and well-being has to do with our lifestyle and our environment. So, especially until the age of 85. And that's when genetics really comes into play even more strongly than we thought possible. So, one of the things that I like to think about and talk about is the fact that, well, genes, they load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. Aging is no longer simply a matter of fate. It's a matter of the steps we take. And it's something that we can actively influence. We may not be able to change it completely, but we certainly can influence it.
Oh, I agree with that. And, you brought up a great point in that I remember my own grandfather. I think my earliest memories are back probably under 10 years old, but he seemed ancient and he seemed like he always had hip problems and he always had these things going on. But I know that he was as part of the greatest generation, but then also as a farmer, you know, that wears and tears on a body so much more than those of us
Absolutely.
that have grown up in, let's say, the information society, right? The baby boomers on up that were more office related versus that hard manual labor, although that still happens, of course. But
Yeah, and I would say that sitting is oftentimes talked about as the new smoking because it's really not so great for your health either.
I can agree with that for sure. I mean, it's not just tight hamstrings and a low back; it's
Yeah,
the whole sedentary lifestyle, right?
absolutely. Absolutely. But I can really understand why people feel anxious about living a long life. I mean, there's some scary elements to it, but think about the fact that it could also be very positive. The real opportunity is not just in living a lot of years, which is your lifespan, but living healthy years, which is your health span. And I would add to that and say something that people don't often talk about, extending our brain span. I mean, making sure that we maximize the health and well-being of our brain. We want to make that happen. I would add one more piece to this lifespan, health span, brain span conundrum. I would add the idea of joy span, because what we learned as we dig into the science is that our feelings of happiness, of joy, of positivity can really add years to our life. It's actually been proven by science. Becca Levy, Dr. Becca Levy from Yale, did a study on a longitudinal study in the Midwest of the United States. And what she found is that those who had a positive attitude about aging lived an average of 7.5 years longer than those who had a more negative attitude and had 40% less chance of getting cardiovascular disease. Now, that's pretty remarkable.
Oh, it is. And well, and that ties directly into this idea of I think there's that conversation going on about how long do I really want to live and be productive? Do I really want to see 100 years old or 110 if all I'm doing is sitting in a recliner watching TV because I physically can't do anything? I'm not mentally stimulated. And I think some of what you brought up really ties into almost creating a plan for your aging so that you're not just existing, but you're aging well.
Yeah, absolutely. When I wrote my recent bestseller, Ageless Aging, I talked about let me back up for a minute here. I wrote the book Ageless Aging, which became a national bestseller, and now it's out in over 13 languages, which I'm super excited about. And I think the reason that it has done so well is although I've been in the field of aging and longevity for a really long time, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a scientist, but I have at my fingertips a network of scientists and physicians and researchers who are at the cutting edge of aging and longevity. And I reached out to them and I asked them, what's your secret? What do you do to live better longer? And they told me. And what I ultimately began to see was there is this kind of what I call holistic recipe to live better longer. So it's not just adding years to our life, but adding life to those years, vigor, vitality, health, wellness, and there is this recipe.
Well, I think you're in a unique position because when somebody's aging or working on research on the brain aging, on physical ligaments and joints and things aging, on organs aging, they're all looking at that very specifically, but you're able to pull that together in a more holistic
That's
view
right.
that you're able to educate us on.
Yeah, that's what I love doing. And what I saw, just to give you like an insider's view, it's not just about one thing. It's about a whole variety of different elements that work together. Things like movement. We know that moving your body is, if there was a silver bullet to aging, that would be it. And it's a little different than what we think. We think, oh, do a lot of cardio. But yeah, cardio is great, no doubt about it. So is stretching, so is balance. But the secret weapon is building muscle mass, because we begin to lose muscle mass as early as our late 30s. And that's called sarcopenia, by the way, a fancy name of saying we're losing our muscle mass. But it's a serious issue, but we can fight it, and that's great news. And movement is just one example. There's also what we eat. It's what we do in terms of our brain health. It's what we do in terms of our attitudes and expectations, our managing stress. It's our relationships, our connectivity, and our sense of purpose. They all work together. And by the way, oh, it includes finances also. And if one of those elements is doing really well, let's take a positive point of view. Let's say your movement is doing really well. Suddenly you have the energy and the vitality that might motivate you to eat better and to interact more with your friends and family and to really seek a sense of purpose. So as you can see, these things really work together.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think one of the big things that I'm hearing, whether it's at my gym or around, and maybe it's not new, maybe it's just new to me, is hearing this whole idea of these functional exercises and functional movement, and
That's right.
uh, you know, having the ability, like you said, to that you can reach up and grab a heavy can of food off the pantry. Where I remember going in as a kid, again, I have to go back my experience, and my grandmother being like, "Hey, can you get this down?" She could reach it, but it was like it was just too heavy or too awkward for her. But
Yeah.
now a study in that functional movement is huge.
Yeah, I think functional is good. It's certainly a necessary part. It's not the whole picture, but it's certainly a piece of the puzzle. And I mean, I've had people turn around and say to me, well, gee, am I going to spend my whole day doing exercise? Well, no. Certain movements, well, I would just say certain movements can actually what we call stacking. So, for instance, you could be doing Pilates, and Pilates both strengthens, so it's building muscle mass, adds balance, adds functional movement. So it covers a lot of territory, and that's actually what I do. I try to do movement that actually it serves many purposes.
That makes total sense. And I wanted to ask you too around some of these things that have definitely become, I think, part of the process of baby boomers aging is, are you seeing some of this work in that aging group being more just of a shift, or do you find that it's really much more of a revolution of I guess a shift is kind of the subtleness, but a revolution for me is like sudden, abrupt, and really pushing forward with intent.
Yeah, I think it's a combination. For some people, it's a shift, and they're slow to get moving, to get changing, but they do want to make some changes. They just want to start slow. Just as an example, two of the doctors that I interviewed for ageless aging told me two very different things, but that they relate to one another. One of them said, and that was a cardiologist from the Mayo Clinic. He said to me, start slow. Start with one thing. Start with a shift, if you will, because you're going to have success. Let's say it's in exercise or diet. You experience some success there, and it's going to motivate you to move into other aspects of aging well. And that's will become a slow revolution. The other doctor told me that, and that's Dr. Dean Ornish, who's a personal friend of mine. He said, no, you want a revolution. You want to be able to impact your health and wellness dramatically in a very short time. So do it all. And if you do it all within weeks, you are going to feel so different, so much better that it's going to motivate you to stick with it. So I see both sides of it. And by the way, just in contrast, I remember when my grandmother was in her 50s and I was a little kid and I'd go to the park with her and I'd say, "Grandma, Grandma, come on the swings with me." And she would say, "No, I can't do that. I'm an old woman." Now, I don't know too many 50-year-olds today that even think of themselves as being an old person. So that's revolutionary, just the attitude shift.
Oh yeah. Well, and I think too, to your point, as for me, when I look at this, as the baby boomers moved into their 50s and 60s and so on, they weren't really ready to just go, okay, I hit this age, I'm no longer doing X. And I think we saw a lot of people in that age group that are climbing mountains, that
Yes.
are doing solo sailing trips across the Atlantic, that are doing so many things where the previous generations, everybody would have said, hey, you're absolutely crazy. You're nuts. You're old. You need to go, rest up. You're fragile at this point.
Yeah, there's been a real mindset shift around that. And what's interesting to me is that it used to be one or two examples of people in their 70s or 80s or even 90s, doing things that seemed physically extreme. But now we're seeing dozens of people, hundreds of people doing it. I mean, I do a lot of keynote speaking, and I used to have people come up to me after a speech and say, "Wow, my grandmother is in her 80s and she walks 3 miles every day." Well, I will tell you something. I go to a hiking trail every Sunday with a friend of mine. We're both in our late 70s. We're walking over 3 miles, and we see a lot of other people in our age group doing the same. So it's been normalized. Instead of being revolutionary, it's become evolutionary.
Oh, yeah. Well, and, this part brought up to mind is the older President Bush. I think he was still parachuting out of
He was.
airplanes
He
into
actually did
like
it for the first time.
yeah, like into his like in his late 80s and maybe even early 90s. Now I know Barbara, from what I remember the news stories, she wasn't real thrilled with that. Uh, but he was doing that as kind of a, hey, I'm still alive, I'm still kicking, I still have some adventure left.
And it was on his bucket list. And I think he was 85 when he did it. And I think he did it I'm not 100% certain about that age, but he was celebrating his birthday. And it was something that he had always wanted to do. And he said, I'm going to do it. And he got a lot of positive attention for it, as he deserved to.
That leads me into, we've talked about a little bit, this idea of a health span and a lifespan. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about what those differences are and how we might be able to address or affect either one of those.
Okay, great. Uh, Lifespan is just what you would expect it to be. It's the number of years that you live. So it's equivalent to life expectancy. That's pretty clear. Health span is a little bit different. Health span is the number of healthy years that you live. And in the United States, on average, spend the last 12 to 14 years of life in a cascade of poor health. Things like pain, Could be as simple as that. Diabetes, heart disease, stroke. I mean, the list goes on. And that's not what anybody wants in their last years of life. What we all want is to add life to those years. So we want to better match our health span or the number of healthy years to our lifespan, which is our life expectancy. If we could do that, it would be amazing. But let me add two more things, and I mentioned them earlier, but I'll mention them again, and that is brain span. We want to maintain our brain span. We know that that is something that everybody is afraid of. In a study that we did at AgeWave, we asked older adults, what's your number one fear about longevity? It was getting cognitive decline. So that's not something we want to have happen. And while there's no cure for Alzheimer's disease today, there certainly are steps we can take to delay or prevent it from happening. And then there's something also I mentioned before, and that's called joy span. And that's like adding happiness, adding joy, adding the ability to laugh and enjoy your friends and family. That's joy span. And I think that no matter what kind of shape you are in terms of your health span and even your brain span, if you can expand your joy span, that's a good thing.
I think that's huge, and it's interesting that you bring that up because I think in watching some of your conversations as well as the research, I think that one of the challenges with men is that as we get older, our relationships, our connections get smaller and smaller. But I don't know if that's the same with women because I know that directly impacts that joy component, right? If you have a bunch of buddies that you
Absolutely.
meet at the coffee shop, you're a little bit more happy, a little bit more engaged. Do you have any information
Yeah,
around
I
this?
do. Anecdotally, we see women being more comfortable with socializing, with connecting. But if a woman is more confined to her home as she gets older, it's a little bit harder to do. And loneliness, we know, is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So it's
Mm.
got some real health consequences. So the thing that I find particularly interesting is there's this social connection or relationships, and then there's this sense of purpose or having a reason to get out of bed every morning. And in an age wave study that we did just a couple years ago, we asked people, what's the number one way you get a sense of purpose? And what they told us was incredibly interesting. They said the number one way that they get a sense of purpose is by the relationships with their friends and family. So there's a real connection between socializing or relationships and purpose, and that they're not just nice to have, they're biologically an imperative.
Yeah, well, and that leads me to something that's interesting, and we're going to pivot in because I want to get you've got now direct, information about this. Let's say is that with such a highly mobile society, at least Western culture wise, let's say, it's not uncommon that adult children live away from grandparents and grandchildren are removed and we don't see each other every day. How do you find that people are starting to maintain those connections, whether it's using technology to so that we have that purpose and that connection with family at a distance?
Yeah, it's complicated, and I wouldn't say it's the best news ever, but it's great that we do have some technological innovations that allow us to connect better. So let me give you an example from my own life. As you mentioned early on, I recently had a grandson, Theo. He is now almost 3 months old, and he lives in Shanghai with my son and daughter-in-law, and I live in California. And so that does not make me happy. And in fact, it makes me really unhappy. Makes me feel a lot of, I don't know the right word. I mean, it's not resentment, but it's like desire for them to move closer. I mean, if I could bribe them to move back to California, I would. But my son and my daughter-in-law, once they had Theo, they began to realize the importance of grandparenting. And so they call me with a FaceTime call every single day. They send me dozens, too many photos of Theo all the time, every day. And Instagram, they post a bunch of other photos. So I'm inundated with Theo, and I love that. I would also add that in the last several months, I've been to China 3 times. It's a
Oh.
14-hour trip from where I live. And so it's a huge commitment, but I find it so worthwhile. I mean, just to hold this little bundle of joy, it just, I think it adds years to my life. And so, yeah, it's complicated. It's probably the modern version of, people moving to the West Coast when they grew up on the East Coast. But I keep telling my son, watch out, Theo might move to Mars.
That's true. And do you find too that now that you're having this personal experience, do you think that some of the, I think, studies around the importance of that connection, grandparent to grandchild, also helps fuel this idea of aging well?
There is no doubt in my mind that it is like a secret sauce to longevity. I mean, just the love, the connectivity, the sense of purpose that it brings, the joy. These things all together, I don't know. I think it really gives you a reason to want to stay healthy and vital, not just to live long, but to live better longer, so that you can hold that baby and take walks with that baby when they start walking, and then, talking to them when they're talking, and, being able to interact with them and maybe even live long enough to see them go to college, graduate college, maybe get married and have a family of their own. I don't know. Those are reasons to want to take better care of yourself.
Yes, and I think too that it's one of those, it's a hidden motivation that people, I don't think you really understand until you have those grandchildren come in or those foster kids that come in, and then all of a sudden, because our adult children at a certain point, it's like, okay, they're probably going to be fine.
I don't
We've
know.
kind of seen the high school graduation and all that. Now we've got another generation where it's like, maybe I should get to the gym. Maybe I do need to put the incline up a notch on the treadmill just so I can keep up with those little kids.
Absolutely true. Yeah, I would say one thing. I mean, my kids are in their 30s, and now I have a grandson. I have a daughter-in-law who is just turned 30. And what I see is that my concern and worry about my children continues into their adulthood. But having a grandchild, that feels like sheer joy, which is very different, and a good reason to actually, you're right, get on that treadmill and notch it up a little bit, eat healthier foods, make sure you get enough sleep, all of those ingredients that work together to help us live better longer, not just live longer.
Oh, sure. And what are some of the other ways? You've mentioned a few with the Instagram photos and some of these other things. What are some of the other, I guess, technology that's evolving that you feel is going to really help you stay connected and build a relationship with Theo while he's in China?
Well, I think that I'm not sure that I have the foresight to figure that out, but what I do love is that, we have the FaceTime calls, we have the Instagram connect on a daily basis, we have phone if we choose to do phone, which we rarely do. I mean, if we're going to do the phone, we're going to do a FaceTime call. We also do Zoom calls. I mean, we just had Father's Day. My son, Zach, at his very first Father's Day. So we had a Zoom call with Zach and his wife, Fei Fei, my daughter-in-law, Theo, of course, my daughter, Casey, and my husband and I. And that was terrific. So I think that there are all these tools and technologies at our fingertips. Will it evolve? Yeah, sure. It's definitely going to move forward. But I think that the human connection is far more important than any kind of AI connection. However, anything that AI can do to make the connection easier would be greatly appreciated. And I would add one more thing. If we could get some airlines to invest in having great airline service from San Francisco to Shanghai that didn't take 14 hours, that instead maybe took 4 hours, that would be insane.
Well, I will tell you, I recently heard a podcast with somebody that's starting an airline manufacturing company called, I think it's called Boom,
Hmm.
and they're reintroducing supersonic air travel.
So like the
And
Concorde.
uh, right, but like from scratch, they're not just taking a like military jet engines and strapping it to a commercial plane. They're rebuilding it from like the ground up with that idea of getting from New York to London in like 3 hours. And so Shanghai might be, it's probably going to still be a bit of a haul, but it might be down to 6 hours and not
That would be
14.
acceptable. Listen, 14 hours, it's really challenging, but I do it. And so 6 hours would be welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. So, maybe I know they've got, the last I heard, they do have contracts for
Wow.
different airlines that they're starting to build and fulfill. So hopefully sooner
Fingers
than later.
crossed.
Absolutely. And um, so as somebody that studies and has been in this part of the aging, what do you see and what can you prognosticate that you might see in the next 10 to 20 years as far as medications, as far as healthy habits, as far as maybe food, all the things that we've talked about that go into aging well?
Well, I see three different things. One is that I see the value of AI in terms of health technology and coming up with better medicines and relating more effectively with your own physician. We all know, and probably have done it ourselves, getting a diagnosis through an AI chatbot. And you know what? Those diagnoses, they may not be everything, but they certainly give you direction to bring up with your physician. And physicians, as we know, are so overwhelmed these days that it's uh, great to have a shortcut. So that's one thing. We're beginning, second, to learn more about the brain. We don't have all the answers. Hopefully, AI can help us gain the answers, the knowledge, and the development of medications to help us maintain our brain health and vitality. Maybe in our lifetime. I'm certainly hopeful that that will be the case. So that would be a great thing. And then we're learning that we can gain tools to get more personalized health and wellness answers. This is particularly important for people who are in rural areas and in socioeconomic areas that are not as developed as other areas. They need resources that are free or next to free and easy to access. So one last thought about all that. I think more than anything, and I just spoke recently at a longevity venture summit in Geneva, Switzerland, and I said this, and people were, yeah, that's exactly right. We need education. We need all of us, no matter how old we are, to understand the role we play in maintaining our health and well-being, because there are a lot of elements, and I've mentioned a few of them, that we can take control of, that we can be sure we move every day, we can eat healthier food, get at least 7 hours of sleep a night, and so on.
Yeah, I think that's going to be huge, and I think AI is going to be able to help us with that as we try to take more responsibility. I think for a long time, w- as a society, we've been told, like, okay, all the food that's on the shelves is safe to eat. Everything here is fine. Everything here is fine. And then it's turning out that it's not. And it
Yeah,
might be
that's an
fine for some,
understatement.
but not everybody. And as we start to get more information, we can take more responsibility and understanding, like, well, maybe I can't have as much wheat and potatoes and things as a lot of other people can. I have to do something different so that I can age well.
Yeah, and I think it will be very personalized as AI continues to give us answers and direction. So that's a good piece of information. However, I will tell you this, I think there's a lot of conflicting information out there. And with TikTok influencers taking very strong positions that are sometimes not exactly in alignment with the reality of the situation, with the science, that makes it even more difficult. So, well, let me give you an example. Some people are saying, oh, it doesn't matter if you eat organic or not. Well, maybe 10 years ago it didn't matter. But in today's world, with the amount of agricultural spraying that goes on, you want to eat organic as much as possible. That's just one example.
Oh, sure. It's going to be really interesting, I think, as more and more information comes out. But then you also run into the counter side of that where it's like we're all in the situation of information overload. And
Yes.
so that's why I think some of the books and some of the work that you guys do to help synthesize some of this down for us is so really important.
Yeah, like in Ageless Aging, which, is still very available. Uh, I talk about that. I give people checklists. It's not the kind of book that you sit down and you read cover to cover. It's a kind of book you use as a great resource because it clears up a lot of the confusion, and it's based on science, not on like, oh, this is a great idea that I just thought up. So that's very good news. I also think that this is a place where AI chatbots are very helpful. They can help clear up the confusion, and sometimes they're wrong, but many of the time they're right.
As we start to wrap things up, I want to pivot back a little bit to thinking and about Theo. And have you sat down and thought a little bit about with your interviews and your work and everything that you've done, what his impression of the work and the takeaways would be as he starts to look into, hey, what did grandma and grandpa, what were they doing and about aging, and how does this affect me?
Yeah. Well, for one thing, Theo will likely live to 100 or 120. And that's going to be sort of normal. He's living in China. Hopefully, he won't be doing that his whole life, but you're going to see life expectancy continue to rise. And my hope is that health span and brain span will rise as well. So that's one thing. Second thing, I think what will become normalized is that aging is not to be feared. Aging is a lifelong process that goes on and on, well past the age of 50, 60, 70, and that he won't look at those ages as being so-called old in the proverbial sense of the word old. He'll look at it, in fact, as an opportunity, as a chance to reinvent himself, to live life in many different ways. And that's kind of incredible. And third, I hope he sees a world where there's more intergenerational connectivity, where each generation has something to add to the world, that we can work together to make the world I don't want to be cliche, but a better place because we certainly could use that right now. So hopefully
Oh,
those are some of the changes he'll see and he'll look back and he'll say, my grandmother, my grandfather, they were one of the first to be looking at this whole aging and longevity thing.
well, and I think too, Maddie, just to tag on to it, is that those kids, my grandkids, your grandkids, they're going to see that departure point from the people that were very rural, very manual labor information age, and understand that there's a real clear line, I think, between those generations. And then what do you do with the second half of your life, and how do you pivot, and how do you reinvent yourself, for lack of a better
That's
word?
right. Yeah, I think we're already beginning to see, the early signs of that in certain segments of the population. Um, has it caught on in the general population? No, but it will. It definitely will. And as we see more people not just live longer, but live with better matching their health span and their brain span and their joy span to their lifespan, you're going to see that take hold.
I love it. And as we wrap this up, Maddie, what, for somebody that's listening to the Grand Tribe podcast and they're maybe feeling anxious or uncertain about their aging process, what's something that you might want to give them as a word of encouragement to either start a new habit or change something up, or maybe that aging isn't the same now as it was, that they remember it when they were younger?
Yeah. Well, I would say, again, I would say three things. For one, I would say that aging is a lifelong process and that we have far more control. Science tells us that we have far more control over our health and our well-being than we ever thought possible. So we have what I would call agency over our health and well-being. It's not up to fate. It's in our hands. Now, not completely, but it is in our hands to a much greater extent than we ever thought possible. Uh, Second, I would say those old school views of ageism that are very embedded in our society, that that's not inevitable. We can change those. We are responsible to change those. The idea that people over the age of 50, 60, 70, and 80 don't matter, that we should throw them to the side. No, that's old school thinking. And we need to help transform that societal or cultural norm. We don't want that to be the case. And third, the idea that they can not just live longer, but live better and live with health and vitality and relationships and a sense of purpose. And again, a sense of purpose, I don't think I said this before, but I will now. This idea of purpose has been misunderstood. I mean, we feel like, oh, I need to start a nonprofit or have a second or third career, which those things are great. And a lot of people are doing those, but it may be as simple as spending time with your grandchildren, helping out with them whenever you can, taking care of your dogs, walking your dog in the morning, volunteering at the local food banks. I mean, there's all different ways to have this sense of purpose which gives our life meaning, which gives us a feeling of connectivity to the world at large. That's what I would say.
Well, that's great advice. And Maddie, thank you so much for being on the Grand Tribe podcast. This has been a very fun conversation, and I know I've learned a lot. So thank you so much for spending this time with us.
It is my pleasure, and thank you, Greg, for having me as a guest.
The moments your grandchildren remember most are the ones you share together. With Road Scholars Grandparent Adventures, you'll explore incredible destinations, learn from expert instructors, and discover the world side by side. From national parks to wildlife encounters and hands-on cultural experiences, these programs are designed to bring generations closer through the joy of learning and travel. Learn more at roadscholar.org/grandadventures.